psychological disorders. So like, I'll talk about like what psychological disorders are, and like then we're going to go on to anxiety disorders specifically, and then talk about different types of anxiety disorders. Then we're going to do an activity followed by learning assessment. Anyways, is that good paper?
Do you have a brighter one?
Oh yeah. Is this good to? Hey Zach.
Yeah.
Can I erase that?
I've got an eraser. Yeah, so everyone can know that there's going to be 4% added to your grade.
Yeah.
Either 7 or 7. The high was 96.
Is it 4 points or 4%?
So after I add in your study guide points, whatever percentage that ends at, there'll be 4%.
Okay.
So let's say you got 30 out of 50 on the test, and you did a way good study guide, you get 15 points out of that, so that's 45. And so 45 out of 50 is 90%, so you have a 94%. So it's a blend between points and percentages.
Okay, so first we're going to talk about psychological disorders, and like what makes a behavior like an abnormal or a psychological disorder. So the first thing that like what makes a behavior a psychological disorder is there's the 3 Ds they call it, and it's distress, dysfunction, and deviant. So deviance, like a deviant behavior is something that's different from the culture. And so like, as you can see in like these 2 pictures, like let's say this man, like that's something that's normal for their culture, that wouldn't be considered deviant. Or like if their culture, like that was the only person in the entire culture that did that, then that would be a deviant behavior. So like deviance isn't like something that's different from you, it's something that's different from an entire culture. And that also changes over time. There's a lot of things that would have been considered like abnormal or deviant than like 50 years ago that today are completely normal. So the second thing that constitutes a psychological disorder is distressful behavior. Distressful behavior is something that causes harm to the person who's exhibiting that behavior and also to others around them. And then there's dysfunction, and that means that it interferes with day-to-day life, or like it makes it so they can't do the normal everyday things. And for something to be a psychological disorder, it doesn't have to be all 3 of them. It can be like deviant and distressful, or it can be distressful and dysfunctional, or like any combination of the 2. Is there any questions about the 3 Ds?
You said distressful behavior again?
Yeah, so distressful behavior is just anything that causes harm to the individual or the others that are around them.
Can we go back to the last slide?
Yeah. All right, is everyone good with that one? Okay, so there's 2 ways of understanding psychological disorders, the medical and the biopsychosocial perspective. A medical model is one that looks at psychological disorders like illnesses. So it's kind of like a doctor where you have something wrong, like physically with you, and then they have like a treatment to cure it. So that's saying that a psychological disorder is caused by something physical and can be treated or cured through therapy and hospitalization. And then the next model is the biopsychosocial approach, and that's looking at the way that psychological disorders are caused through like interaction between a person's mind and their body and others around them. So the way that they interact with other people in like social situations. Are there any questions about that? All right, so there's like a system of classification for disorders, and the most popular system is called the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And it's like really important in the field today and in like therapy, but it's also like heavily criticized. The DSM is important because it takes like a variety of symptoms and then classifies them all into one disorder. So if you're looking at like a treatment plan, then the DSM will like classify one disorder and it will lay out like a treatment that you can use and will help like other therapists. If they were treating a person that was transferred, like they could look at the classification that you gave them, and then they would be able to better know what they needed help with. Does that make sense? And then it's criticized because the DSM, it has like almost every behavior you can think of. Like almost everything that people do could be classified as a disorder according to the DSM. And it's also criticized because giving people labels in general can cause other people to look at them differently. And then if you have a label that's been given to you, sometimes you start to act like the way that the label says that you are. Has any of you guys ever like known anyone in your life that was given some kind of label and then they kind of acted differently afterwards?
I have an example that is not mental health related.
It's okay.
So,
That's perfect.
I have a sister who's an OBGYN, and she told someone she was pregnant, and then as soon as she got off the table, she started walking with her stomach out like this, and kind of just taking on the affect of being pregnant, even though she had just been told. So there was no physical change. It was just now she had the label pregnant. So she started acting that way. And I think that can happen also with a lot of these disorders that people can diagnose, like with a hyperactivity and kind of rise to match the label.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a comment?
I was just gonna say, I think it's found commonly in people like that are diagnosed with ADHD. They might not say anything before, but as soon as they're diagnosed, and they think that they have like an excuse. Oh well, I can't like stay focused. I have ADHD or something like that. I think that's a common.
Yeah, that's a perfect comment. Did someone else have anything else?
Well, I think it goes along with like defining anyone as anything, giving anyone a definition, or creating a belief within anyone. I'm doing a research paper on creativity, like the belief of creativity in the individual. And I feel like at a very young age, like children are defined as creative or not. You know, they carry that belief. That belief will allow them to engage in activities that reinforce that belief. And so I think it goes along with that.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to verify that I understood the few points as I came in. So it was criticized because there's so many classifications and you can really classify anybody as anything, right?
Yeah.
And then people start acting like
And
who they were classified as.
Yeah, labels can cause people to act differently. And and it can cause other people to look at other people differently as well. There's a story, it's in your guys' book. It talks about some students that they went to like a mental treatment facility and they told the people that they were like hearing voices. And they were completely normal people, but they told them that they were hearing voices. And then they were like taken into that treatment facility for like a week. And then the people that were treating them like saw them as people who heard voices and people with disorders, even though they didn't really have anything. They just like made that up at the start. And they would like the people who were treating them, they looked at like their normal behaviors, like taking notes and stuff like that, as symptoms of their psychological disorders that didn't really exist. So like labels can cause people to act differently, but it can also cause other people to look at you differently.
Okay, and then it was important just because it helped us figure out people or what.
It kind of when you have the label, like say someone has schizophrenia, it like has a specific set of symptoms. So like someone who's treating them knows what those symptoms are, and then it kind of helps them to lay out a plan to treat them with. Any other questions?
I just have some comments, kind of arguing more in favor of for labels. I have a friend who was diagnosed with panic disorder, and it helped her to actually understand what was going on with her. Because she was having panic attacks. She didn't know why, she didn't know what was going on, but when she actually saw someone and talked to them about it, and they were able to identify it, it created a lot of clarity for her. and so that they could come up with a treatment plan and be able to help her.
Yeah.
And then also, another one of the labels yesterday, when I was talking to one of the kids at work who was severely bullied as a kid, and we're talking about the label of survivor and the label of victim, and how he can change from being a victim to a survivor, and how that can be empowering.
Yeah, that's a really, really good story. Yeah, like labels can be super good and they can like be negative as well, but they're very commonly used today in the treatment of psychological disorders. One of the main classifications of psychological disorders is anxiety disorders, and I'm going to talk about just a few different anxiety disorders that people have. The first one we'll talk about is called general anxiety disorder. And does anyone know what anxiety is? Do you guys know why it's important? Like why anxiety is important? Anyone? I can call on someone. What's your name?
Me?
Yeah.
Dallin.
Dallin, do you know why anxiety is important?
I mean, it's a good question that really needs some thinking.
It's okay if someone else has something.
I'm confused exactly what you're asking. Are you saying like anxiety, like having anxiety is important?
Yeah, like why anxiety could be important. Like it
So
could be a good thing.
so like why would it be important for me to have anxiety?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I don't hear what you're asking.
I think you can avoid certain situations with that anxiety. You know something's maybe a little dangerous and you should back off of it and have a little fear of it because it could cause damage.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's perfect. Like anxiety is like a warning to us. So when we get anxiety about something, it should be something that is that we should fear. But the thing about anxiety disorders is like it's taking that thing that's good, like the warning that we have, and it's like making it too much. It's like too much of a good thing, and then like you're worrying about things that you shouldn't be worrying about, or you're worrying too much about things. And general anxiety disorder is a disorder where you're worrying about things all the time. So general anxiety disorder, the symptoms are persistent worrying, sleep deprivation, which is caused by like not being able to stop thinking about the things that you're worrying about, difficulty with concentration, which is caused by the same thing. And there's not really a cause, an apparent cause for general anxiety disorder. They just kind of worry about like everything in their lives. And it can be disabling. Like if you wake up in the morning and like you're thinking about all those things that can go wrong throughout the day, like you might not even want to get out of bed. It's just something that it can really negatively impact people. Are there any questions about general anxiety disorder? Go ahead.
I'm wondering, like, would you say anxiety overall has risen over the past few decades?
I actually don't know. Dr. Draper?
When we look at basal stress levels have increased. So, however, among certain classes and among those who value certain things. If you're on the rat race, if you're working the 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. lifestyle, then your stress levels are probably going to be very high. If you're a full-time mom staying home with a group of kids and you're isolated socially, your stress level is likely to be very high. The more we've lost our community ways of living, of coming together for meals, working together, looking out for each other, the more human stress levels will increase overall.
So the loss of community?
Loss of community is where there is an increase in stress.
Any other questions? So the next disorder is called panic disorder. Panic disorder, it's kind of described like an anxiety tornado. Something that's interesting about panic disorder, well, I guess I'll talk about the symptoms first and then we'll talk about that. So it's like a sudden episode of intense anxiety. You have an irregular heartbeat when you have an anxiety or a panic attack is what it's called. There's chest pains that are associated with it, shortness of breath, choking, trembling, and dizziness. And something that's interesting about panic disorder is that when you have those panic attacks, a lot of people, they think it's actually a heart attack. So like when people at the ER will see a lot of people going in for heart attacks who actually have anxiety attacks. I actually had a roommate recently. I was sleeping, and it was kind of funny. He just like comes and knocks on my door, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's in there? And he walks into my room, and I'm like, I was sleeping. And then he's like, hey man, like I just feel like really, really anxious. Like I'm just, like I feel really cold, but like hot at the same time. And like my heart is like beating really fast. And he's like, I think I need you to take me to the ER. And I was like, what the heck? It was like 5 in the morning, and I was so tired. So I was like, all right. So then we went to the doctor, and we went to the ER. And then the doctor, like, he tells him, he's like, I don't see anything physically wrong with you. Like my friend, his mom had a heart attack before, so he's like worrying about it being a heart attack, like, and that caused him a lot of stress and anxiety. But the doctor was like, there's nothing physically wrong with you, like it's something like mentally. So like my friend had mistaken it for something that could have been a heart attack, and that happens very often. So it's really just a panic attack. Does anyone have any questions about panic disorder? I have a video, but I can't figure out how to get it to work in this slideshow. This one, What About Bob? It's this clip where he's talking about like having panic attacks when he leaves his house. That's pretty funny. Okay, so the next disorder we're going to talk about is phobias. So everyone has like different fears about things, but like a fear is different than a phobia. Like when you fear something, you're just like kind of scared of it, but you're not going to be like really scared and not be able to like come in contact with it sometimes. But like with a phobia, people are so scared of something that even like hearing mention of it like causes them anxiety, and it causes them to have some of those feelings that are associated with general anxiety. And this video is going to work though. So this is a video that just like has some of the different phobias that people have.
Wow.
Okay, so as you can see, like there's a lot of different things that people have views about. One thing that's really interesting about the anxiety disorders is that they can kind of like, they're like really interactive. So if you have like a phobia of like clowns, then like causing, I mean, like if you saw a clown, it could cause a panic attack. So like one disorder isn't exclusive, like you can have symptoms of one and then like it can lead to another disorder. So that's kind of interesting. Are there any questions about panic disorder? Yeah, go ahead.
So how come for some people the phobia is, they can't stand it so much, and then for other people, I don't know, I met some guy on the bus once, and he wanted to talk to me, and he just kept talking about spiders because he used to have a fear, he used to be arachnophobic, and then he said he started studying them, and then he wasn't scared. But then like my mom on the other hand, she's definitely afraid of snakes. If you even say the word snake in her presence, she will get upset at you sometimes. Like she'll just say, someone started talking about the S's, and we're just like, we know she's talking about snakes because that look on her face, and she's like, anything with snakes, like she will freak out about it. And then like there's the other, so how does that work?
Like a phobia isn't like, it's not like so it's not the same for everyone. like as with any anxiety disorder or like any psychological disorder, there are levels, and they're not like caused by like something in specific. Like your mom like might have this really strong fear because like that's just how she feels about it. But this guy, maybe he like had a fear of spiders, and then he like started like hearing about spiders more often, and like he kind of got he got used to it. Yeah. And maybe as he started to study it more, he realized that they weren't that scary. Like, and that can happen, and that they can get treatment for phobias as well. Therapists use things like, they use like treatments where they like expose people. I think it's called something exposure.
Exposure with response prevention.
Exposure with response prevention, where they train people to have like more calm reactions to things that they're scared of. So like they would show, like they would talk about a snake with their mom and then like train her to have a more calm response to it.
Is it common for people to overcome their phobias or fears?
I don't know the statistics, but it can happen. Dr. Draper, do you know?
For those that come into treatment, about 30%. Those who don't come into treatment, we have no way of knowing. I guess we could do a general population survey.
Are there any more questions? Alright, so next we're going to talk about OCD. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is characterized by two things. There's obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors. So an obsessive thought is something that's repetitive, unwanted, or obtrusive. It's a thought that you just can't get out of your head. So like someone with obsessive compulsive disorder that like washes their hands too much, like a lot, they might have this like unwanted, repetitive thought that their hands are dirty. And so what they do, like the compulsive behavior that treats that, is washing their hands. So they might develop a pattern of washing their hands a lot because they need to get rid of that obsessive thought that their hands are dirty. Does that make sense? And then, so the compulsive behavior kind of treats the anxiety they're having about the obsessive thought. Is there any questions about OCD? Okay, I think this is the last anxiety disorder we're going to talk about is post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder, a lot of people think of this disorder when they think about like veterans or people who have gone to war, but it's important to know that PTSD isn't just for those who have gone to war. People who have this disorder can have lived through some kind of disaster or like abuse or some kind of attack. Any traumatic event that causes a lot of like emotional response can cause post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's characterized by recurring nightmares, social withdrawal, jumpy anxiety, trouble sleeping. Yeah, that's all of that. But like people who have this disorder, they can like kind of re-experience the trauma that they had, and it kind of causes them to want to withdraw from other people because they might fear that it might happen again, or they might think that others will reject them because of what has happened to them. Are there any questions about post-traumatic stress disorder? And another video. Alright, so now we're going to do the activity. What I want to do is have everyone split off into 4 groups. So we'll just have like one group in that corner, one over here, one over there, and one over here. And I have 4 like different stories of people with different anxiety disorders. And so what you're going to do is, as a group, we'll have one person in the group read the story out loud to everyone, and then one person act as like a scribe. And as you read the story, kind of write down the symptoms that they're having, and then classify which anxiety disorder that they have. And then at the end, I'll have one person from each group come up and present and like read the story, and then tell what you guys found about the person. Okay, so that. Okay, we got 3 in group.
Okay, you see right there, bud.
Alright, I'll read it.
I wrote last time, so I'm not doing it.
Months after the fine fed and Maria was not herself, unable memories of the exact amount of money. At night she would have terrible dreams, restless and sleepless nights. She had not the exception. She had difficulty walking back from school because the route took her past the side where they had. And she would have to go along her home. She felt her soul, her emotions, and as though she had no real future at home. She was anxious, tense, and absolutely I didn't feel like it was something was happening. She was put in a situation she thought she was in trouble. She had
I don't see where to plug it in. We're having battery issues. I don't see where to plug it in.
The guy told me if you just plug it in. Oh, here it is. It's right here.
Okay. That was my fault with technical
Shut down like the different symptoms that you see and then something's gonna get around. But you guys have any questions about it? So some of the symptoms
as if some of them are good people allow, because I get so I'm without for socializing.
Am I reading it?
Restless nights.
Ready himself for combat. He began to
How about my YouTube?
I'll write everything down and then.
Okay, so
Yeah, I just
you guys figure out symptoms.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, like, we can experience like where it's just like nothing physically.
It's like 10 flowers.
Very interesting, the point like where breathing.
Yeah, I have all of them.
It goes to show how powerful your thoughts are.
Or is like any episode itself, like I would love to see
Yeah,
that.
put on Wednesday, I can type it out loud. Yeah, put it on Wednesday. I'm glad that you were good at like trying to understand because I was really.
Did you guys figure it out? Okay, so you guys are about ready?
So yeah, did you do a study guide then? That's good.
Alright, is everyone about ready to, you have to present? Is your guys' questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Is you guys ready to present? Okay, cool. Alright, so it sounds like everyone's done. We'll just go on to the presentation. Cool. Okay, so whichever group has a